Hello, everybody, and welcome to your Ruby Live event. My name is Eric Wynkoop, and I'm the Director of Culinary Instruction, and I'm also one of your chef instructors, a member of the instructional team here at Ruby, and always so happy to receive and critique your assignments. I want to today specifically invite you to my office hours, and this is your chance to ask questions about food and cooking, and my chance to do my best to respond to those. And we have a nice list of questions already uh, uh, in the queue. And so we'll get started here momentarily. I want to mention a couple of things, my routine housekeeping comments as we get started. The first one is if you would like to participate more directly, you're welcome to submit a question or a comment in the dialog box in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. And also, as you take a look at the list of questions that are already populated, in the individual questions, you'll see a heart-shaped icon. And if you would like a particular question answered sooner than later, go ahead and click on the heart, and that'll push up that question in priority. All right. But otherwise, since we've got a nice list to take a look at today, let's go ahead and jump in. And the first one is from Cheryl, who says, I have been plant-based for 2.5 years. One of the most difficult parts of my menus are creating various plant-based sauces that are tasty. Well, the FOK course, the Forks Over Knives course, provides some recipes on this topic. The quick answer is yes. All of our courses, core courses, including FOK, will introduce some sauces for you to work with and dressings. And, even more importantly, the course will start to introduce you to the concept of controlling ingredients, which is really at the one of the elements at the heart of cooking. Aside from controlling time and temperature when we're dealing with heat and active cooking, there's also the selection of ingredients as well as the manipulation of those ingredients. And then controlling that process until the end to get the desired result. And one of those things is to start or to increase, take to the next level your use of spices as well as herbs. In particular, I'm a fan of fresh herbs. Dry herbs are fine, but fresh herbs are wonderful. And then also to consider other ingredients that come from the global pantry, whether it's mole from Mexico or the various styles of miso paste from Japan, or other condiments and pickles from, let's say, India and other regions of South Asia. Okay, there's, many, many places to go to explore literally and figuratively in order to bring more tastiness to your dishes. Okay, so I look forward to your good work. Thank you. And next up, David says, hi. Hello, David. I'm noticing many of my whole food plant-based recipes turn out flat, lacking flavor. Any thoughts on how to perk up my meals? So this question is very much like the previous question from Cheryl. And I'm going to, emphasize for you, David, to start to explore and deepen your understanding and usage of spices. Usually in combination with other spices, in the form of a blend, or it could just be singularly. Maybe you're just adding one or two in a whole form, so it's something rather simple. And then there's fresh herbs as well. And so in terms of spices, take your cue again from the global world of recipes and ingredients. Many of the spices that we work with originate in South Asia, in India. Also, if we take a swing around to the east into parts of Southeast Asia and Indonesia, that really provides the focus of the spice regions. And so take a look at those recipes. And not that you have to continue making Indian recipes from here on out, but just learn to combine those spices. Also, consider going down to a South Asian or an Indian grocery store and experimenting with some of these spice blends that are available. There are dozens to choose from. Some of them are labeled as being specific for particular dishes or preparations, but that's not to say you can't use that blend for something else, which I find myself doing from time to time here at home. So check out that beautiful aromatic and flavorful world of spices. On the note of fresh herbs, if you're able to grow your herbs, even in a very simple, potted garden arrangement, that's a wonderful way to have access to fresh herbs, not to mention economical too. I find small packets of organically grown, certified organic herbs around here, to be a few dollars, for a single pack, whereas you can just step out onto your veranda or your porch and, enjoy the bounty of your harvest, especially during this time of the year. So I encourage you to do that. Thank you. All right, next up is a question from Lisa, who says, I'm still having trouble with no oil sauteing. When sauteing multiple vegetables, I assume you wait till the onions are sticking and slightly brown before adding carrots, celery, etc., and then deglaze. Yes, and not necessarily, and maybe. It depends on what you want to do. So let me outline for everybody the process of the no oil saute. And in our Forks Over Knives course, as well as our flagship plant-based professional course, we offer lessons on the no oil saute. And the lead up to that is a lesson on heating your pan. And we have the student gradually heat up the pan as you add a drop or two of water, and then you observe that water in the pan, and you wipe it out, and then add another drop and observe that water in the pan as the pan temperature increases. And you want to find this window in there where the water bead stays together, and it has a tendency to sort of jump around and maybe move in a swirling manner in the pan. And it's a temperature range, not a single point. So you've got some leeway there. Below that, the water tends to grab onto the pan and really doesn't form a clean bead. That looks like mercury. And then if the pan gets very, very hot, the water will tend to splatter and break up into smaller pieces and then start to evaporate pretty quickly. And so you want to find yourself in between those zones that I just described. Now, I want to take a little tangent here and share a word of caution. This particular approach for heating the pan is it can be used for both oil and non-oil sauteing. Now, if you are going to use this pan heating method with oil, please note that oils have not only a smoke point, which is that temperature at which they start to smoke, and you want to avoid that, stay cooler than that. But if you get above that temperature, then you get into what we call the flash point. And this is where the oil will burst into flames. And the risk with this pan heating technique, at least, as you're starting out, is you're still learning. And I have heard from a student or two that said, "Hey, I put oil in the pan and it just about took my eyebrows off." Well, the pan was too hot. And so before we start adding oil to the pan or anything else that's flammable in that way, practice, 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 and find that zone where you need to be, okay, without the oil first. Okay, now back to the response here, taking this other path toward no oil saute, same sort of thing. Once we start warming up the pan, start adding some food product to see what it does, so you can start to then work with the equipment that you have. Okay, after identifying what you think is going to be that middle ground of that best temperature range with water, you're adding food, and I recommend it could be onions. It could be like a small dice or medium dice of carrots. Something that is going to give you some feedback in terms of browning, but not be so troublesome in terms of sticking. So in other words, I would not recommend russet potatoes for this activity because you'll be cleaning the pan very quickly. With a lot of elbow grease. So that's step one, okay, is to understand your equipment and to control the temperature. Now, back to your question, Lisa. So if you want the onions to be caramelized and softened to let's say, a deeper extent, then we can add those first. And then we can work with those in the pan. We can even deglaze those on their own before other ingredients are added, okay? On the other hand, if you, let's say, want some lighter color and you're okay with the onions cooking at the same pace as the other ingredients, then feel free to put all those things in together, knowing that you won't have individual control over each item, but if we have the knife cut sizes, that are comparable, so that things cook at a similar pace, or they can be in different sizes if you want the bigger pieces to retain more toothsomeness than the smaller pieces throughout that joint cooking process. That's a fine approach as well. And then, the third scenario would be to add your carrots and celery first. And then you can soften those, get those edges browned, and then you can add onions if you want perhaps no color added to the onions. And so there are different ways that we can approach what sounds like the simple task of no oil sauteing. Okay, and so all of this knowledge and the ultimate decision that you make, right, is going to be based upon your accumulation of experience and the skill and know-how around controlling time and temperature and knowing what outcomes you want. Okay, so keep those things in mind. This is the beauty of cooking. At in any cooking school. And I've visited many. I've been affiliated with a couple, and the approach is always the same, right? We can only teach you a finite set of knowledge and skill within the bigger world of cooking. And so once you start to understand these fundamentals, then feel free to experiment some more and branch out in different directions to further broaden and deepen your knowledge. Thank you. All right, next question. This is from Rose, who says, can you explain why oils are not considered vegan and best replacements for baking, etc.? If the oils are plant-based, then they certainly are vegan. Let me just start out with that statement. I believe where you're coming from is perhaps in the Forks Over Knives course, where there's talk about omitting oil and other, these added fats for the sake of health, along with salt and, even your bleached granulated sugar. Okay. But back to the oil. and any of these ingredients, actually, salt, sugar, oil. But the oil will keep at the forefront of our thoughts here. Feel free to use them if you want. Feel free to decrease the quantity if you want, and feel free to omit them if you prefer. It's going to be totally up to you, okay? This suggestion of omitting these ingredients in the FOK course, it's a suggestion. It's also a recommendation if you're addressing some particular health concerns that might best be approached through the elimination of these things like added oils, okay? But I do understand, having had conversations with other students, that from the wording or the way this topic is introduced, that some folks think that oils are not vegan. Vegan means plant-based. And so, yeah, oils that come from plants can be used within this framework of cooking, okay? But as I mentioned a few minutes ago, as you move through this forks over knives approach to cooking, and you feel like, oh, I can only get that flavor from roasted potatoes if I add some oil, and that's the way I enjoy it, then consider adding some oil to your potatoes. Whereas, you might choose to omit the oil from other dishes that you prepare, okay? Find a balance that works for you. I think that's the most important thing in cooking. Don't make it punitive on yourself, in the name of better health. Unless you flip that switch and that's the path that you want to go down, in which case you will not feel that you're missing anything or that the process is punitive in any way. Okay. But I hope that answers your question, which was a simple one, but also provides some context and some food for thought. Thank you. To the second part of your question, in place of baking, oil adds, oil can play different roles in baking, but one of them is to provide moisture. It really depends on what it is you're making, but one of the roles is to provide moisture. And one way to do that is to use a vegetable or fruit puree. And one approach that I've used in the past is to use applesauce or even banana puree. And, those things add a lot of moisture that's held in place by the fiber, through that baking process. So those are a couple of quick ideas. Take a look online as well to see what other bakers are doing. And I think you'll find some choices that you can tinker with in the kitchen. Thank you. All right, the next question is from Maulana. Welcome from Dubai. Nice to see you. Question is, what's your favorite Asian food? Could you please suggest me what kind of Asian breakfast do I have to make? I'm planning on making Asian breakfast menu. Wow. Got a couple of great questions here. The first one, what's my favorite Asian food? That one's kind of an easy question for me. I like all food. I mean, honestly, in a way, I'm in search of something I don't like. I haven't found it yet. And when it comes to Asian food, boy, that's some of my favorite foods. Definitely come from the large, continent of Asia. But Japanese food and Indian food are near and dear to me. But I've enjoyed other cuisines as well. Regarding breakfast ideas for a breakfast menu, Asian breakfasts come to mind, and I would start perhaps with China and congee, the rice porridge. This is an example of a simple dish, at least in its basic form, that can be made into many different variations based upon what you add to it. And so to create a menu with some different options or varieties of congee, I think can be easy for the kitchen and satisfying for the consumer. And so, you might use a vegetable stock or a chicken stock, for example, to prepare the base porridge. And it can be flavored in its simplest manner with some ginger, maybe a little. It could be some fried garlic and some soy sauce, and then from there you can create many variations. Traditional ones are wonderful, and then others that might better suit your clientele. Okay, but that's going to be one idea, the congee. And then I think about uh, Indian breakfasts, and a couple of ideas that are very common come from South India, and these are common all throughout India, in my experience, as well as outside of India. And this would be the combination of idli and sambar, or dosa and sambar. And so, sambar is a relatively thin in viscosity, sort of a soup, stew like of a preparation, more like a soup, I guess. I think of stews as being thicker, but um, it's got some vegetables in it. It's spiced very nicely with sambar masala, and also um, on the side of the idlis. Idlis are the steamed, call them dumplings, made from rice and lentils, typically a combination of those. And the baseline version is a white version using white rice and peeled lentils. But in South India, you find many variations using lentils that are skin on, using combinations of other grains and lentils, legumes, to make some beautiful variations, both visually with added texture as well as flavor. And so this is another way that in the kitchen, from a single base concept, you can create a number of different variations that can be very interesting for the consumer. And then the other popular item, also hailing from South India, is the dosa, which is often described as a crispy crepe. So a very thin flatbread, using fundamentally the same batter that is used for the idli. Both of these, by the way, benefit from fermentation to add a little more complexity and satisfaction to the flavor. And dosa can be served on its own. Very often, it is served with a bit of a filling, and referred to as masala dosa. Very commonly, it is a spiced potato um, uh, preparation that goes inside the dosa, and then that's just kind of folded over or rounded over the top, and then that's served together with the sambar. And again, you can create a lot of variation on this, and that's where my suggestion lies: is to start with some of these classics, but investigate and play with some of the variations that you find, rather than just the white version that's so common in the export context. And then the third idea would take me to Japan, where of course, these days breakfasts vary tremendously, and they can look very much the same as the rest of the world in some cases, if it's bread and coffee that you're talking about. But in a historical and traditional context, a common Japanese breakfast would consist of a bowl of rice and some miso soup and some grilled fish, and then some pickles on the side. And with the miso soup, there's a lot of variation that's possible because there's so many types of miso. And commonly, at least here in the U.S., we talk about white miso, shiro miso, and aka miso or red miso. But even within those two categories, there are many variations. And then in the middle ground here, along this sort of spectrum or broad category of miso paste, there are many, many to choose from. You can always start to make your own as well. And so in this way, you can vary the flavor and the look of the soup. The internal ingredients can vary quite a bit based upon the season and based upon the region. And based upon the household, of course. And so, in a hotel, restaurant, kitchen, there are many, many possibilities. And then when it comes to the fish, there, again, so many species or variations are enjoyed, in Japan. I personally tend to lean toward oily examples. Mackerel is a favorite. Salmon is quite acceptable, and so many more. And you can start to even provide a little bit of flavor, always allowing the natural flavors to come forward first, but secondarily add some flavorings to enhance what you have. And for example, the flavor of yuzu has been trending, in recent years. It comes in both, green versions and reddish orange versions. Different chilies are used, different aromas come out. So you can start to play with these sort of variations. Also, consider, things like regional specialty salts, like mikan or tangerine salts from the south of Japan in Kyushu, specifically Kagoshima, and bring some interest to these otherwise classics that you can offer your guests. Okay, I hope this will give you a place to start in developing your menu. Thank you. All right, next up from April. Does cooking or baking nutritional yeast change the nutrition value of it, or does it remain the same? This is a question that I don't have an answer to. I've never come across anybody that has discussed, how the nutrition, the value would change through cooking, of the nutritional yeast. You might consider reaching out to a university that has a food science program and ask your question to see if they might have some information for you. Thank you. Okay, next up, I've got a question from Rosie who says, how to keep food warm while making several dishes, or as, for example, when I made the pho, the vegetables needed to be blanched, which meant plunging them in ice water, making them cold. Okay, so, in terms of the blanch, shock, hold sequence for vegetables, first of all, we will do that when we are preparing those vegetables ahead of time to be held for service later on, okay? And typically, we want to try to hold foods cold, just to, in the name of food safety. It kind of slows down all of the microbial activity within the food. But if you are going to prepare something like vegetables and serve the dish, assemble and serve the dish immediately, there's no need to blanch them. Go ahead and finish the assembly. Either however you stage the bowl, whether it's with the pho broth first or second, go ahead and assemble that, and then serve that to your diner, your guests, your family members. Okay, but otherwise, in terms of keeping foods warm while you have other things going on, so some of the things to consider would be to put a lid on the pot. Okay, I'm going to start out with some easy ones here. And, if that's suitable in keeping the temperature where you want it, that's one option. It's also possible to turn on your oven, set it to the lowest temperature, which is in the neighborhood of 170 degrees Fahrenheit for most ovens that I've seen, and then use that as a holding oven and holding box, and you can place food in there. Now, that could be hot very often, in which case we can heat the oven and then turn it off and then let it gradually cool down as we put something in there to be held. Okay. If it's too hot, it'll end up overcooking even in that setting. So we can heat it, turn it off, and then enjoy the benefits of the falling oven. Another idea is there are what looks like a griddle, and it's designed to hold a couple of pots and keep them warm. And this will free up stovetop space. So that's another option for you to consider. Okay. And I suppose you can even just use a griddle if you happen to have like an electric, pancake griddle. But there are also very similar looking appliances that are marketed as, holding and heating surfaces for pans. And these are appropriate for service time, as you've described, Rosie, or for a buffet where you want to keep a pot or two of food hot for your guests. Okay, and so try or consider some of those approaches. Thank you. All right, next up from Barbara. I have a recipe for carrot salad. The ingredients are carrots, scallions, olive oil, wine, vinegar, and sugar. I swapped maple syrup for the sugar, but what can I use instead of olive oil? So it sounds like what we're looking for here is to remove the olive oil. And one technique that I've used off and on over the years is to create a flavorful liquid that's going to be suitable for the salad. I'll take as an example vegetable stock. Now, the beauty with vegetable stock is you can flavor it however you want, right? You can certainly use the base recipe that we offer, but you can start to adjust the ratios of those ingredients. You can remove them. You can add others. You can add spices. You can add other herbs, so that the flavor of the stock will be in alignment with whatever it is that you're preparing. Okay, so you've got some stock. And then lightly thicken that with a slurry, for example, a cornstarch slurry, and then chill it. Okay. And then what you're aiming for is a viscosity that would replicate the viscosity of olive oil, so that you get a similar mouthfeel as you consume the food. Okay. And so that's, I think, a pretty easy approach, and it gives you a chance to really tailor the flavor, that flavor detail as you desire. Okay. So again, it's stock. We're going to thicken it with a slurry. I don't recommend flour, but cornstarch, could be arrowroot, and aiming for a viscosity that's similar to that of oil. Okay. Thank you. Let's see. Moving on here. Marcia says, how do you make black bean brownies? I will start by briefly saying that you'll need some beans, and they can be any beans, right? Black beans work great. So let's call it black beans. And in order to cover up the flavor of beans, we usually use cocoa powder. Which is very rich, very strong in its chocolate flavor, and does an amazingly good job in really punching through any other flavors that might be there. And a sweetener will need to accompany this. The cocoa powder, I'm going to recommend you use 100% cocoa, so no sugar, right? No sweetener, 100% cocoa, and then add a sweetener of your choice. start with a recipe, but you can always make changes as you go along. And let's see here. There's some sort of a flour in there to give the whole thing some structure, like a brownie, right? We want to get that body, that structure, and then also to help it bind, right, along with the beans, but to help it bind. And this is where I have used recipes that call for oat flour. And you can use oatmeal and grind it to make your own oat flour if you want. But oats, as you add the liquid for mixing, they tend to get sticky, and this is where you have the binding that takes place. Okay, and there might be chocolate chips, there might be a pinch of salt, there might be a couple other things like vanilla extract or vanilla bean. I think is a very nice addition to give it some depth and a little bit of aroma around the edges. That's the way I think of it anyway. But I recommend that you look at a recipe. There are many of them online, but as with any recipe, make it a couple of times to understand where the author is coming from, and then start to make little changes to better suit your palate or your audience. Thank you. And next up, we got another question from Marcia, who says, what's the best vegan dish to bring to a rib off where everyone eats meat? So a rib off. So it sounds like a cook off, right? Featuring ribs. That's the way I'm going to take this. So if you're asking about a vegan dish that is going to replicate ribs, I don't know. On the other hand, if you want to think about a plant-based dish to be enjoyed with other meat that might be at this event, I would say, gosh, there are so many to choose from. And, I can't recommend a best one per se. I think the best one is going to be what you feel is going to be most appropriate for the audience or what you want to achieve through your participation in this event. And this brings an additional thought to my mind. So I'm going to take a little tangent and talk a little bit here about plant-based cooking. Okay. And so in much of the world that has a history of plant-based diets and plant-based cooking, such as India and other regions in South Asia, such as Japan and the tradition of temple cuisine, shojin ryori. The plant-based dishes, they reside on a pedestal all their own. They reflect the seasons, and they reflect nature, and they reflect the ingredients that are used for that particular preparation. And there is no connection to replicating animal cookery. Not even a nod, not even a glance. These are this approach to cooking, is one that is really mentally and emotionally disconnected, right, from the animal and cooking and eating the animal. And so while what I just said, I realize strays from the core question here, hopefully it provides some food for thought in terms of, how one develops their own food philosophy, which then informs your cooking and how you interface with these external events like a rib-off. Now, on the other hand, you can probably find cookbooks out there and folks that are happy to try to replicate ribs in some way with lentils or wheat gluten or something like that. But yeah, I would need to look at a cookbook myself to talk about that with you. But otherwise, I hope you'll think about this other approach to plant-based cooking. And then back into your context here, think about a dish or two that would stand on its own pedestal, but taste wonderful alongside some ribs. Thank you. All right, next up from Jenny. I made tortillas recently. The masa seemed old. How long should you keep masa flour? Wow, this is a great question. And it's similar to questions we get from time to time around, how long does X last? And my approach to ingredients, to food, generally speaking, is to try to use things as quickly as I can. And part of the strategy is to buy things in packages that are the best size relative to my usage rate or my cooking volume, which might mean small containers. It might mean buying a container, a package, and then sharing it with others so that we can all enjoy the benefits of this food item, because all things will go bad over time. Now, the other part here is to consider storage. Okay. And all foods that I can think of benefit from a cooler rather than a warmer storage area. And then the usual storage guidelines apply. Keep it out of direct heat, and control moisture or humidity, which can be a problem for a lot of food items. And so in terms of how long should you keep masa flour, again, my answer is as short as you can. Try to enjoy those tortillas and other things that you might make from masa. Um, you know, uh, to provide a maximum shelf life is nearly impossible because there's so many variables. Okay, in the warmer months, things have a shorter shelf life. If you live in a warmer climate, things can have a shorter shelf life. So you want to take into consideration the bigger environment that you're in. Okay. Remember that if you have smaller quantities of things, you can also store them in the refrigerator or the freezer. Those are fine environments to prolong the freshness or let me say prolong the shelf life of an item. What you're doing is you're slowing down the spoilage process. Okay, you're not really. I don't like to say you're retaining freshness, because freshness is always on the decline. With very few exceptions. Okay, and instead you're controlling the glide. Is it a steep descent or is it a more gradual descent in quality? So the other thing is masa, when it gets bad, it becomes rancid, right? So the oils that are present, they oxidize and they take on a bad smell and an off flavor. And you'll start to pick that up. And sometimes in the beginning, you may not notice it in its raw state, but it could come through once it's cooked. And if that's what you find, just go ahead and throw the whole thing out, because at that point, it's not good for you either. Eating foods in that state are just not good for your health long term, especially. Okay. So anyway, I hope this approach provides some context on how to handle these things. Otherwise, wow! Enjoy tortillas. We bought a 50-pound bag of masa harina a couple months ago. We're working through it. We eat a lot of tortillas around here, and I hope you will too. Thank you. All right, another question from Malana. I graduated already, but is it possible to redo some assignments to get higher grades? Unfortunately, it's not. once you complete a course, most elements are locked into place, all those movable elements like assignments and quizzes. So it's not possible to go back and redo those. Instead, we will keep that record in place so we can refer to it as we need to. But as always, you can address the content of the course for review. Thank you. Jenny asks, can I use an oven to ferment natto? I love it. For the greater audience out there, natto is a form of fermented soybeans, which comes from Japanese cuisine. Natto comes in many, many different styles, and different size beans are used, and the degree of smelliness, the fermented stinkiness varies. Some natto is sweet. Some of it is crispy, like nut brittle. It's super interesting and a very delicious category of food. So back to your question here. I suppose you could, as I mentioned a few minutes ago in today's program, you can use your oven, as a warm box by heating it up, turning off the temperature, and just finding that space in there that's appropriate temperature-wise for what it is that you're doing. Definitely turn the oven off. If you're fermenting something, even at the lowest temperature setting, the oven will be too hot and you'll end up killing all those beautiful microorganisms. And in fact, you might need to just play with the oven repeatedly, turning it on and off in order to maintain your temperature over time. The other thing to do is to wrap that container with towels or a blanket in order to insulate it, which will help to maintain the temperature without great fluctuations. Okay, but yeah, give it a try. I'm curious to know what kind of results you realize. Thank you. All right, I got a question from Melissa. When assembling mise en place, how do you handle items such as spice, hot sauce, etc., that you may want to shake over the dish during execution? Is the bottle or spice just included in the picture? Yes, I think that's in terms of the assignments, that is a fair way to approach that. And in real life, that's I think a fair way to approach that as well. Now, in terms of assignments, just turn the labels out so we can see them. You might mention that in your description as well, but to be able to see something in a photograph also helps us understand better what's going on. As sometimes particular variations of a product or a particular brand of a product, can make a difference, and we might understand that by seeing the label. Okay, I hope that's helpful. And I guess another thing I'll take a moment to mention here is throughout your course, if you have questions, you've got a couple of ways to address those. Number one, on each task page at the bottom of the page is the Q&A function. If you have a question that pertains to the information on that page and is the type of question that would benefit a broader audience, then go ahead and use that function. If you have a question that is more personal in nature and more unique to your situation, then please reach out to us at support@rouxbe.com. And one of us will get back to you for a one-on-one conversation via email. Thank you. All right, next up from Diane. How long can a dressing keep when stored in the fridge? That is the Dijon vinaigrette. Thanks. So, kind of like the earlier question that was asked around the storage of masa, there are some variables. When it comes to things that are more perishable than let's say, a dry item like masa harina, like a dressing or some other leftover food, my starting point is about a week. Okay. And, if your temperature is set of your fridge is set appropriately, in the, say upper 30s degrees Fahrenheit, you're certainly going to get a week or so out of the leftover food item. Now, some things that are higher in oil, higher in sugar, higher in acidity, these are all natural preservatives. And so it can extend the shelf life in the refrigerator for your dressings. But sometimes we have other ingredients that are themselves still perishable, and textures can decline, flavors and aromas can shift. Um, Even though the item may not make you sick, um, which is often our first concern, right? Is that whole discussion on foodborne illness. And maybe I'll get to that in just a moment here, but back to the food usually. What we experience is a change in texture, aroma, taste and flavor qualities that become a personal sort of an equation, right, as to whether or not we want to eat that item, whether we still enjoy the item after it's shifted, some degree. Again, it may be considered good, as in not spoiled, but just how edible it is going to be up to your own aesthetics. Okay. Let's talk about foodborne illness. Okay. The most common concern really is the spoilage bacteria, the common bacteria that's all around us. It's on our hands, it's on our utensils, it's in the air, it's all of the, it could be spores, it could be bacteria, so they're different things, but they're all microorganisms that contribute to the spoilage of food. That's the biggest issue when we talk about hanging on to leftover foods or wet foods, right? These wet environments are ones that are friendly or hospitable to these microorganisms. And so when it comes to spoilage microorganisms, spoilage bacteria, these things generally aren't going to kill you, but they could give you some GI distress, whether it's a tummy ache or diarrhea or, something kind of in that realm. On the other hand, there's a lot of talk, and in the news, we hear about the diseases, right? The foodborne illnesses via these diseases like salmonella or E. coli or the various and the sundry other things that we have in our greater, especially processed food system here in the U.S. and other places too, but very significantly here in the U.S. Those sort of diseases are severe, and the outcome may well be death. And this is why we talk about them so much, and we want to avoid them, even though the occurrence is relatively rare. Okay, they do happen, but the chances of bumping into this sort of thing is relatively small. Okay, the more common issue is going to be spoilage of your food and ingesting some spoilage bacteria that can give you some mild distress. But because of the possible dire consequences, we need to understand and practice food safety and sanitation. Okay, so I don't want to minimize that at all, but I just want to put it into context. Thank you. All right, Razi, who says, I love this style of cooking, the forks over knives style, and eating. I do find that I am gaining weight gradually, maybe overcompensating and eating too many nuts, hummus, tahini as a dressing. Any recommendations? Wow, this could be me. Nuts, hummus, tahini as a dressing. That's a good chance that's what it is. I feel that's what it is for me. And so, any recommendations? I think the recommendation is, number one, you recognize it, which is what you've done, and to verbalize it, which is what you've done, and then to start making adjustments. And in the place of these beautiful nuts and hummus and my favorite tahini, which I just had, by the way, before today's live event. You start to bring in more of the vegetables and grains, particularly, and then fruits as well. And I only place it in that order because fruits have more sugar typically than some of these other things in the grain category or veggie category. Excuse me a moment. But just start, eating more of these other things that are going to have lower calorie density, okay, than these beautiful foods that you mentioned. Okay, all the best. Thank you. All right, next up from Nancy. Can you discuss cashews used for sauces, creamer, etc., and how to ferment into hard cheese? When your cashew sauce starts to ferment, can you still use it or need to toss it out? So, for most applications, cashews are very simply blended, and they can be soaked. Soaking, increases the hydration, which will make them easier to blend, and it can often result in a smoother product. Okay, but it also depends on the equipment that you're using, and in terms of making cheese and fermentation, in my experience, I add some sort of a microorganism that I get from the store. And in this way, it's a controlled fermentation, which is generally what you want in order to minimize the risk of something wild and undesirable getting into your cheese. Okay. And, this is where I would recommend that you follow the suggestions of a recipe or the guidelines otherwise, for this process, as you follow a specific procedure. Okay. And at least do that first so you understand the process, and then you can start to make changes, as you desire. Okay. Now, the second question here, or the second part to your question, when your cashew sauce starts to ferment, can you still use it or need to toss it out? Okay, so the one thing that I've always told my students is, when in doubt, put it in your mouth. I know that goes against most advice out there, but taste it. That's the only way that I will know if your cashew sauce is any good or not. And then I would give you the answer. But instead, you can taste it yourself. And I'm not saying like chow down on a bowl full, because it might give you a tummy ache if it is bad. But just try a little bit, whether it's on the tip of your finger or the tip of a spoon, and you're going to get an idea of whether you like it or not. And you're going to, find the bitterness or the off aroma. That's going to be your lead in to some fermentation or spoilage that is undesirable to you. Okay, but try it, see how you like it. Okay, this is how once upon a time in human history folks discovered fermentation in the first place, right? So we're just practicing some of that intrepidness in this modern era. Thank you. All right, next up from Maura. I'll take Maura's question here, who says, I haven't really tried many mushrooms outside of standard, white, and portobello, but I'd like to start experimenting. Are certain types better in certain dishes or better served alone as a side, or is it more a matter of individual taste? In my experience, excuse me again, mushrooms are versatile creatures, and they do very well when sauteed on their own and just lightly seasoned. And they also do very well, when playing with others in the pot. And they can be just a secondary ingredient in a soup or a stew, or a pasta dish or something else. And so there's a lot of flexibility, and I would say just go for it. Give it a try. You're going to discover what you like, what you don't really like, and your knowledge and skill set will deepen and broaden. Thank you. All right, and Zuma, hello. Let's see, I watched a video on FOK site that suggested weight loss is possible on plant-based lifestyle. Do we have any meal plans tailored to weight loss on FOK site? So, on the Forks Over Knife website itself, that is administered by a different team. And I encourage you to take a look at it. And I know they have a meal plan, for example, and you can ask questions of their team. At the bottom of the page, I believe is where you're going to find the contact us sort of information for the Forks Over Knives team. But otherwise, for the Rouxbe team, right, as we manage the Forks Over Knives cooking course here that we created for them, we don't have a meal plan per se. I would say that the course itself is going to provide the training and education to you directly, so you will be empowered to create your own meal plan. The course contains many practice recipes that you can just simply use on their own if you like them, and feel free to change them and tailor them to suit your palate, and your family and friends that you're feeding. Okay. And of course, as we talked about earlier in today's program, you can include added fats, cooking oils, or you can omit them or just decrease them, again, to suit the desired outcomes, depending on your situation. And so the most important thing is, right, as we start to learn cooking, there's a lot of empowerment that comes along with cooking. And it frees you from maybe, feeling the need to eat out or to buy something from the store that's ready-made, because you're going to have the skill and the know-how to do it yourself. And so I hope you enjoy the process, have patience, and keep on practicing. Thank you. All right, Diane says, for the no oil dressing task, can you use the dressing needed for the roasted sweet potato salad with arugula and balsamic vinegar? Sure. Yeah. If you want to, you have a choice on that assignment. The no oil dressing instructor graded assignment. Let's see. We ask that you if you don't mind, I'll do this in two ways here. Number one, we ask that you choose from the practice recipes presented. So because we know those recipes, and we can best critique your work based upon the color, the texture, viscosity, your description of the flavor, to then provide the most meaningful feedback to you. Okay. If you are going to use a different recipe, I'm going to initially discourage it, but if you insist on doing that, please use one in the course that we can then reference, because we'll probably be familiar with it, again, enabling us to provide the best feedback to you. Okay. But if let's say you are unable to consume one of the practice recipes presented, I understand. We can stray from those and substitute another dressing. But if you're able to find some enjoyment in one of those, then please do. Thank you. All right, Victoria says, how do you store pre-soaked beans and for how long can you store them? Okay, pre-soaked beans can stay in the fridge for a while. I have probably kept them in the fridge. It kind of depends on the beans, depends on your fridge. There's always variables, but I'm sure that I've kept beans in this state for 2 weeks or more. You got to change the water, ideally daily, because it gets funky pretty fast. Okay, and understand that if you miss a couple of days and you come back to the container and it's got some bloom on the surface, just drain the water, rinse the beans, and then fill it up with fresh water again. The beans are probably fine. The water gets funky much quicker than the beans do. Okay, but otherwise you can drain them and you can freeze them, right? Or in the water in the fridge. All right, those are my recommendations. Thanks. All right, April's back. Looking to get some new pans. Do you recommend Caraway ceramic or stainless steel? Or are there other brands to look at that you recommend? Wow, I don't know Caraway brand, so I cannot speak to those. This is a good question. Yeah, I will first say that there are many call them good, they function well, cookware brands out there. Part of this question, there are always variables, right? Again, I love cooking. I love kitchen work because it's never as easy as it looks. When it comes to cookware, there's price to consider. You can spend thousands of dollars on cookware that comes from the store. You can spend a lot less than that on a cookware that performs very, very well. Okay, and let's see here. Also consider the weight of the cookware. Some cookware is pretty heavy when it's empty. And then think about loading it up with 2, 3, 4, 5 pounds of food. Is that something that you can comfortably and safely handle? And for some people, that's fine. For others, it becomes very uncomfortable, in which case you want to be judicious about the cookware that you select, as well as the size of the cookware that you need relative to the volume of cooking that you need to do. Okay. I'll provide a couple of ideas to consider. And this is just scratching the surface. Okay, please understand that. One is the Hinkles. Hinkles is known for their cutlery, but they also have some cookware out there. And I know at least one line out there that I've seen is quite fine. It's stainless steel, and they all have bonded bottoms, layers of aluminum or aluminum and copper to more evenly conduct heat, because stainless steel doesn't necessarily conduct heat so evenly across the bottom of a pan. Let's see, another one over the years that I've seen, but I haven't looked lately. Okay, but this was some time ago. Was at Costco, and it was the Kirkland brand stainless steel set. And the price was a pretty accessible, just a little bit over $100 for a set, and they were of pretty good quality as well. And that's just a couple of things to consider. But again, there are many to choose from. Ideally, you're going to go to a store, like Williams Sonoma, like Costco, and get your hands on them and feel them, and have that input be part of your decision-making process. Okay. Thank you. All right, and Zuma's back. How good are Ziploc bags for food storage in the pantry compared to airtight glass jars? How long can I keep, say, flour in them and it stays okay versus airtight glass jars? This is a great question. I've never done a side-by-side comparison, so I don't have a specific answer to that comparison, but Ziploc bags can work well. You can always double bag them for greater security. But on the other hand, airtight glass jars work well too. As I had mentioned earlier in today's program, as we talked about masa harina, which is a type of flour, this is going to be true of any other flour. Store it in a relatively cool place. And it could be in the fridge. It could be in your basement. It could be in some, air-conditioned part of the house, out of direct sunlight, and then also where the humidity is, relatively low in the case of flour. Okay, and that's going to extend the shelf life. And then try to use it. Just either keep it out where you can, access it easily and see that it's still there, or make an inventory list that you can check periodically to make sure that you're on task to use these items within a reasonable amount of time. Storage durations can vary. Around here, I'm in the Northwest, in the Portland metro area in Oregon. This is where, flour can last for, maybe 6 months or so. And it's usually pretty safe. In some places, the shelf life will be shorter. Sometimes it's due to bug infiltration. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Okay. If you're, in a place like Arizona or Colorado, where the air is much drier, perhaps the shelf life will be longer. So there are some variables to consider. Thank you. All right, next up from Linda, who says, if you are unable to use cashews in vegan cheese sauce, what would you recommend using? I would say use a different nut or seed that you can use. Sunflower seeds, come to mind if you want to avoid nuts entirely. And let's see here. It could be a legume. Tofu, which is a soybean-based product, is used often to make dressings for its creaminess. But other legumes can be used as well. Note that to some extent, texture, color, even flavor, can shift a little bit. So you got to find something that's going to work for you. That's going to be true of using sunflower seeds also, or some other seed that might work for you. Is that there's going to be a unique flavor associated with that different product. So give it a try and see if you like it. Be open to some experimenting, and you're bound to find something that works well for you. Thank you. And next up from Jimmy. Hello. Please tell us more about the differences between light-bodied, medium-bodied, and full-bodied red wine. Holy cow, Jimmy. You've asked a question that is it's a huge question here. So difference between light, medium, and full-bodied. The first is going to be the mouthfeel, where light-bodied wines. I think about like maybe a Beaujolais. Beaujolais Nouveau comes to mind around Thanksgiving time. That's a fairly light-bodied wine, light and relatively light in flavor and aroma as well. Compared to a medium-bodied wine, let's say like a Pinot Noir, you've got a lot more flavor and mouthfeel, a deeper rounded feel on the palate. Full-bodied wines, maybe a Cabernet Sauvignon would be an example. That's an easy example. It just feels heavier. It's one that you can almost sort of chew on in a way. Flavors are deeper, more intense. Okay. So, that's just a place to start. And as you start to think about, food pairings, then think about the delicacy of the food versus the robustness of the food, and how you might choose the wine for pairing. And a more robust, stronger flavored food might be best suited with a more full-bodied wine, for example, so that they complement each other without overpowering one another. But the way to keep on moving down this path in terms of learning about wine is to read, right? And there's so many types of resources, but to take in information, whether it's by video or books or something else, and then to drink, and then do side-by-side comparisons of these different types and categories and different regions of wine to start to understand how wines vary across space, across time, in terms of aging, in terms of the style that's produced from that particular producer. Okay, and then if you can, even join a group. It could be a course of study that leads on the path to becoming a sommelier. That's a great way to do this. Or to join some sort of a group that more casually, but in an educated way, drinks and talks, discusses the wine. It can be a lot of fun, and you'll learn a lot as well. Okay. And part of the approaching the wine is to start to develop a sensibility and a vocabulary that can be used in the greater context with other people. Okay. And I think that's very helpful as well, rather than just drinking in isolation and making up your own world of wine. You might have a hard time relating to others and discussing wine or buying wine or selling wine at some point in the future. Okay, so give this a thought and give it a try. Jump in and start studying wine from all these different aspects. Okay, place of origin, producers, style of wine, food pairing, methods of production, etc. Thank you. And for the last question today, this is from Diane, who says, do you have an opinion about the Yo Nana's machine for making nice cream? Thank you. No, but Chef Shar does. Chef Shar has a lot of experience making nice cream with this particular technology. And she tells me she loves it. She uses it, with her different audiences. She does a lot of teaching locally in her community, and has nothing but good things to say about the nice cream that results. Okay, I hope that's helpful. Thank you. All right, so this brings us to a close and a conclusion for today's program. I want to thank you all for joining me, and look forward to seeing you at my next live event, my office hours. And until then, happy cooking.